Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 337, and today's date is April 10th, 2014, and the title of this episode is DHS is preparing for the next nationwide disaster, which will cover up the economic collapse. Because what do we actually know here? Well, we understand that the central bankers, the U.S. government, are out around the world continually keeping this dollar propped up, and they're having trouble doing it. All of their plans that they have done at this time in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Africa, they are kind of falling apart right now, and the people in these countries are pushing back. We see what's happening in Ukraine. They really wanted the entire country of Ukraine. They didn't get it. In the Middle East, they took over all the different countries there, inserted a private central western bank, put their natural resources on the US dollar, and now the people are fighting back, and they're having a very rough time keeping the status quo there. Africa, same thing. So we can see all of this occurring right now. And what they've been doing is they've been prepping for war. They've been moving military assets into different locations, and this just hasn't happened in the last month or so. This has been happening for the last year and a half, where they've been doing the pivot to Asia, moving all the military assets out that way. They've been moving all the military assets in Europe, and they're continually doing this, and now they're surrounding Russia, trying to build their case of why they need to go to war, to cover up this entire economic collapse. And they realize from everything that they've done that the only way to do this is to bring home an event to the United States. And this is why DHS is coming out saying, from this report that was never released now, they see that North Korea does have the ability to explode an EMP over the United States, which would knock out power in different parts of the country. And we can see that they've been planning on this for quite a while. You have to remember Janet Napolitano, when she was leaving office, she didn't say if there's a cyber attack, if there's an EMP, if the lights go out. She said it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. They already know that they're going to do this. They already have it planned out. When they're pushed enough against the wall, they realize that they're going to have to pull this off and create this amazing false flag to make all the people in the United States say, you know what, I can't believe this country did this to us. They collapsed our economy. Half of the country has no electricity at this point, and they've been setting off nukes and chemical weapons all over the place. Banks are frozen. The economy's breaking down. We need to go to war. And this is what they've been trying to do, along with many other things where they're trying to take away our rights and things like that. And we're going to discuss a little bit more about this later in this report. Let's get into the economic collapse news. We're going to head out to Catalonia in Spain again. And we understand the people had a vote, a referendum. Spain rejected, say it's not part of the Constitution, but the people in Catalonia are not giving up. Catalonia's president has vowed that he will not give up on holding an independence referendum despite the Spanish Parliament recent voting against the possibility. Catalan institutions will search through the legal frameworks to find a way to continue with this consultation and finally secede from Spain. So they're moving forward with this. They are not giving up. And we're seeing this happen in many different countries. A lot of these countries are in deep, deep trouble economically. They can't provide for the people. They have a huge amount of austerity, a huge amount of debt, and the unemployment is completely skyrocketing. Now, across Europe, we understand that unemployment is absolutely terrible. It's around 12.1% or 12.2% around that area right now. And what we're seeing right now in many countries, in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, we're seeing that housing prices are starting to come down. And it looks like the bubble is popping. And right now, the Eurozone housing prices dip at end of 2013. Even though they told us we're in this incredible recovery and housing's picking up and everything looks great, and this was going on in Europe during August, September, October of 2013, well, not really a recovery, because right now housing prices fell in the Eurozone at the end of the last year despite an acceleration in the region's economic recovery, which really isn't happening. And now what they're seeing is housing prices are falling in Spain and Italy and other countries. Eurozone residential property values dropped by 0.7% quarter on quarter in October to December period. Very odd, because they told us we were in this recovery and housing was doing fantastically. On a quarter-by-quarter basis, the decline in property prices was led by a 1.3% drop in Spain, a 1.2% loss in Italy, and France, the Eurozone's second largest economy, saw prices fall by 1% on the quarter, because what has been happening is the central banks have been pumping and pumping these markets up, pumping the housing up, and now we're seeing that they're reaching the top and they're slowly coming down, because the housing bubble will pop. And before it pops, they will need to create this event. And this is why they're ramping up for war right now. They thought they were going to have this back in August. They thought they were going to have this whole thing with the false flag, with the chemical attacks with Syria, but that completely fell apart. So here we are in the spring of 2014, and everything is ramping up right now. Now, I understand we talk about jobs a lot and how we know it's a complete illusion. We know the information is manipulated, made up. The Census Bureau is being investigated right now for falsified information, and we could actually see evidence that people aren't actually working, because if people are working, revenue is coming into the states. And right now, the states are saying, you know what? We're not getting that tax revenue like we used to. What happened? And they're saying that millions of Americans have yet to see any economic recovery. This is coming from George Goel, Executive Director of National People's Actions. They're struggling to find jobs, make ends meet, and provide for their families. This report shows that the revenue needed for recovery is not there. People do not have jobs. The corporations are not bringing in the revenue. They're not paying their taxes. They're looking for loopholes so they don't have to pay taxes. The people are not bringing in the revenue, and the states are having problems. Even though someone goes from a full-time job making 60, 70, 80, 100, 150,000, and they find a new full-time job at less, or they find a part-time job, there is less revenue coming into these state governments, and they're starting to notice this. So all this talk about how great employment is and it's rebounding and we're going to see better days coming into spring and summer, we are not. And I'm going to tell you right now, they're going to continually make everyone believe that the recovery is here. They're going to show the unemployment numbers continually coming down, because this will fit perfectly into in what they want everyone to believe. They want everyone to believe that we are recovering, that things are getting better, because when this event hits, it's a lot easier to say this other country did it than to say, oh, I'm sorry, we made a mistake. Everything was collapsing and we were all lying to you. And we are definitely going to see a complete collapse of the economy, covered up by an event, then covered up by war. Now, is this going to happen like one right after another? No, we're going to have the event. A couple months will go by. We'll put all military assets into place. Another couple months will go by. And within a year or so, we will be in war. But that event that hits, we will feel that right away. When the lights go out, when the banks are completely frozen, when capital controls are put into effect. Yes, that we will feel right away. And everything else after that will just bring the economy further and further down. This will be blamed on another country as they ramp up war, and this is what we're seeing. Now, we know it's really bad when dollar stores are closing. When they're not bringing in the money from selling things at $1, we're having big problems. Right now, Family Dollar is closing 370 stores at this time, and another company, Telecom International, is laying off another 3,000 people at this time. Okay, now, we understand back in 2007, 2008, we had a complete collapse of the system. It was pumped back up by the Fed, and there were a lot of key players that caused this with the subprime. A lot of investment companies, a lot of banks were all involved in this, and one of them was Countrywide Mortgages. And right now, the banker who helped crash housing market is now helping the government craft another law that has to do with mortgage reform. Now, this should be the right person for the job because, he was involved crashing the entire real estate market, but now they have him doing this other thing. And right now, a controversial housing finance reform legislation is making its way through the Senate Banking Committee, was co-written by a former mortgage trader for Countrywide Financial and Wachovia, two of the subprime mortgage behemoths at the center of the housing market crash in 2007. The former mortgage trader's involvement is raising alarms with some government watchdogs and critics who say the legislation is skewed in favor of the nation's big banks. And of course it is. They are creating all of these laws not to help the people. They're created to help the banks. The bailout was to help the banks. The bailout was not for the people. These laws are not for the people. The bail-in documents, the new laws, are not for the people. It is always for the bankers. They could care less about the people. The Fed, we have to remember, is a corporation. The central banks across the world are corporations. They care about themselves and profit. The people, they don't care about whatsoever. Now, China, we understand that they're continually taking on more and more gold. And there's a purpose in this, because eventually they're going to want to back the yuan. And also, it protects them from sanctions and from other things that are going on around the world. And this is why China and Russia are continually buying gold. It is like an insurance policy, and everyone should be buying gold or silver, depending on what you can afford right now. And again, I don't sell gold or silver, so you can't buy it from me. You're going to have to go out to one of the other places. I mean, I personally, what I use, and I have no association with these, I either buy it from Kitco, I buy it from APMEX, so you can decide where you want to go and purchase this gold. China has more gold right now than official figures are showing. And what they're saying is that China is rising steadily with their gold purchases. The official figures from China Gold Association show that the Asian superpower consumed about 1,176 tons of gold in 2013, 41% higher than in 2012. Owning a lot of gold to diversify investments means China is not beholden to the political decisions or monetary policy decisions from the United States. This is going to protect them. And we understand that Russia, China, they're making deals right now all across the world, especially China, to pump up the yuan as the next reserve currency. And right now, Gazprom is going to be selling bonds in yuan bond issues. And this puts another nail in the coffin of the dollar, basically. And this is what we're seeing happen right now. Okay, now I talk a lot about the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, and of course the Second Amendment, and I'm very concerned about the UN Arms Treaty, which was signed by John Kerry. It's pending in the Senate, just sitting there waiting for something, maybe an event to occur to have this pass. And what we're seeing right now, and of course the corporate media doesn't report this, no one really does, but we have to be concerned about this, because what the UN is trying to do is they're trying to make every country join this UN Arms Treaty. And right now, April 2nd, 18 countries, including 5 of the world's top arms exporters, delivered proof of its ratification to the United Nations. This is a noteworthy development because the arms agreement will enter into force when 50 countries have presented proof of ratification to the United Nations. Right now, they're up to 31 countries that have ratified the arms treaty. And we have to remember, John Kerry signed this and it is pending in the Senate. The president said if the Senate pushes this through, he will sign this. So they have 18 countries to go where this treaty will be enforced, and we're getting very close to that. So we know that this event will be coming. Now, the National Guard is following a direct order. All the Guard's AH-64 Apache helicopters are scheduled to go to the active Army. The National Guard has to give up their Apache helicopters, and there's nothing they can do about it. So they're right now, let's just think about this for a second. The National Guard is losing their Apache helicopters. They don't know why. They can't do anything about it, but they're being removed from them. And advocates of the Army's decision say that the Black Hawks actually benefit the Guard because they are incredible assets for disaster relief efforts. So here is another indicator that something is going to happen inside the country here, because that's what the National Guard is for. So they're taking away their helicopters. We have DHS working with all local enforcement, giving them tanks. Even in these small little towns, they're getting a mine-resistant tank. They're getting electronic equipment. They're getting uniforms. They're getting weapons. DHS is setting up command centers in all the different states. They're having all the local law enforcement come into compliance with DHS. We can see something is coming. We can see they're prepping for something to happen. And if we go out to Nevada right now and we see the problem that Clive Bundy is having out in Clark County, the Bureau of Land Management is out there taking his cattle because he has not paid the fines on cattle grazing. Plus, they say where the cattle goes to graze, it is endangering the tortoises that are endangered in this region. But if we really look at this and we really understand what's going on, he has been fighting. Well, first of all, he has been here, and his family has been here for over 100 years, raising cattle, bringing them through the land. He's saying that the family owns the 600,000 acres of Gold Butte since 1870. The federal government claims that the cattle are trespassing on an arid and fragile habitat of the endangered desert tortoise. But they brought in heavily armed federal officers equipped with 9 helicopters and backed up with snipers have descended on the land right now. This is because he didn't pay fees and to protect the tortoises. Doesn't this seem a little excessive right now for that? Wasn't there a better way to handle this? But no, let's bring in all the forces with all the assault rifles, helicopters, and snipers. The federal authorities say that Bundy has refused to pay for grazing rights for 20 years. Clive Bundy, the last rancher in Clark County, Nevada, has been battling the Bureau of Land Management since 1993 when he refused to pay for the right to graze on the 600,000-acre Gold Butte land he says his family has owned since 1870. Now, let me ask you a question. The federal officials, first let me just say this before I ask the question. The federal officials have seized 234 of Bundy's 908 cattle. It is estimated that the impounding them will cost the Bureau of Land Management about $3 million. Now, why couldn't the BLM just erect a fence that protected the tortoises if this was such a big deal? Secondly, he has been fighting this, saying this is his land. He's been there for over 100 years, and he's been trying to cooperate with them. But instead, they brought in all these armed forces and everything else to this area. They also set up, which I find very interesting, a First Amendment, like fenced-in cage where the people can go to speak about the problems there. And right now that is completely empty, and I discussed this yesterday in the report where they're setting up these free speech zones, and here we are with a free amendment zone that they set up. It's a little fenced-in area, and nobody's in there because guess what? They don't tell us where we have free speech. We have free speech where we say we have free speech, and if we want to criticize what's going on, we do it in front of their faces. We don't do it in a little cage back off on the highway someplace. Secondly, if we really look into what's going on here, they're not really telling you everything. Right now, if we look at Elko County, which is about 6 hours north of Clark County, the Bureau of Land Management auctioned off about 29 land leases for new shale development, for fracking, to a company, Noble. And right now, as of January 16th, they sold 440 acres of public land in 28 parcels in Clark County. To who? We don't know, but this is the first place where they're starting to do fracking. So do you really think they brought in all that armed men, helicopters, and snipers for fees and turtles? No. A corporation, the U.S. government, is behind this because they want to frack in this area, because we have to remember what's going on the other side of the globe. The United States, of course, had the coup d'etat in Ukraine. Russia supplies natural gas to Europe. The United States is out there saying, don't worry, you will not have to depend on Russia. The United States will supply you with the natural gas from all the fracking that's going on in the United States. And what we're seeing them do is take over many other farms at this time doing the same exact thing. So we can see what has happened. They want to provide Europe with natural gas because when the war starts, or if they do something, Russia might cut off their gas supply, and they want to make sure, and they want to make a promise to Europe that they'll have gas no matter what. And this is what's happening right now. It's right in front of our faces. They're just not showing us what is going on. Instead of they're using tortoises and fees, because this battle has been going on for a very long time. It just so happens right now that people have been purchasing this land. The Bureau of Land Management has been selling it, leasing it out to a company that does fracking. So we can see this entire story is completely made up. And the other part of this is they have the First Amendment area, and I know people and militias are coming in, and what the government would love to have happen is that this entire scenario gets out of control, where they can declare martial law. And those people who are going out there, I would say no weapons, no nothing. Do not, just support and not, rally them up to fire or do something. But then again, there's always could be an agent provocateur in the crowd that could start something to get this ball rolling, and this could spread across the country, which would allow the president to say we have to declare martial law on the United States right now because what has happened, and it's spreading across the country. They've tried to do this many, many times, and we're going to have to watch this very carefully. Now, in Turkey, talking about freedom of speech, they will not release the ban on YouTube right now. They are saying they will not release it until that video of Erdogan, John Kerry, is taken down talking about the false flag event. So right now, the ban is still in effect in Turkey. Now, Putin is telling Europe Ukraine gas debt is very critical. Russian President Vladimir Putin has written to European countries warning that Ukraine's debt crisis has reached a critical stage and could have consequences for gas transit to Europe. And he's saying that, you need to do something or the gas could be shut off if there's some type of war, if there's some type of an event. We would have the ability, or those gas pipelines during war could get hit and all this would come to an end. And again, this is why the United States is promising Europe that they will have gas supply from the United States, which I really don't think they'll be able to do, but we'll have to see what happens. Now, the World Bank warns the IMF that Ukraine is not doing that well with what they're doing there. The loan terms set by the International Monetary Fund will cut consumption in Ukraine this year by 8%, as well as erode capital investment. The World Bank has warned the increased cost of household gas and district heating will affect purchasing power and limit the government's ability to boost capital spending this year. The World Bank also said the GDP will shrink by 3%, with inflation jumping to 15% in 2014. They are heading down the same route that Greece did. The United States, the EU, had a coup d'etat, took over Ukraine, filled them with much of debt, and now the entire country is suffering. The Russian side is not suffering. Crimea, not suffering. Ukraine, suffering. Now, we understand that a U.S. destroyer, that U.S. Donald Cook has entered the Black Sea, and it's there with the Truxtun. And I just want to clear some things up in the Black Sea. And maybe you know about this, maybe you don't. But these ships cannot just stay there. They have a time limit. Unless they made a deal with Turkey, because they're the ones who control the Bosphorus moving into the Black Sea. But there is rules, and there are rules that they have to follow here. And right now, a number of highly specific restrictions were imposed on what type of warships are allowed passage. Non-Black Sea state warships in the Straits must be under 15,000 tons. No more than 9 non-Black Sea state warships with a total aggregate tonnage of no more than 30,000 tons may pass at any one time, and they are permitted to stay in the Black Sea for no longer than 21 days. So those ships have a time limit where they can stay in the Black Sea unless Turkey says, we don't care about these rules anymore, you can stay here as long as you want. Again, Turkey is part of NATO, so although the treaty is often cited as prohibiting aircraft carriers in the Straits, there is no explicit prohibition on aircraft carriers in the treaty. However, the tonnage limits in Article 14, which apply to all non-Black Sea powers, would preclude the transit of modern aircraft carrier ships, and this is why the aircraft carrier didn't move into there. Under Article 12, Black Sea states are allowed to send submarines. Non-Black Sea states cannot. And these other rules in the Black Sea, just want to clear that up. Many of you might have known this, many of you may have not. Now, Moscow is very worried about the missile defense shield in Europe, because all along they've been saying that this missile shield is really pointing to Iran. And now Russia's saying there is no way that this is pointing to Iran. We realize, and they always knew this, that it's pointing to Russia. And this missile shield was completely set up, that one that goes from Poland all the way down to Romania, was completely set up for Russia. It's been there. They're bringing in more sophisticated weapons and more missiles into the region to set up this entire thing, because we understand that World War III will eventually break out. Now, we understand that Ukraine has given a time limit for Kharkov, Donetsk, and all these people in these different regions who've taken over the government building. They've given them 48 hours, and we're coming up on that 48 hours where if they don't remove themselves, they will push in and use military might. And right now, U.S. mercenaries have landed at the local airport. Mercenaries that the Maidan-approved government in Kiev is going to use for a mop-up operation in the region. There's about 100 soldiers of fortune have arrived at this time. Judging by U.S. and U.K. press reports, the overall strength of the ground force that the Kiev-based government is going to send to the southeast of Ukraine makes up around 1,800 mercenaries at this time. And this kind of tells us something, that where is the Ukraine military force? Or maybe they're worried to send them in because they will not do anything to their own people, so they have to use outside forces to do their dirty work right now. And right now, the U.S. is paying $8 million a month to have its private armies deployed in Ukraine. So they're spending a lot of money to keep this part of Ukraine right now. And right now, anti-Maidan activists, the terrorists, the people who don't want to go along with the non-elected Kiev government, say they've detained a foreign national in Kharkov, and they posted a video footage on the web. The same video features a group of aggressive people using strong language while interrogating an unidentified person wearing the uniform of the so-called Falcon Police Task Force. The unknown man pinned to the ground speaks English and says he is a U.S. citizen. So we're starting to realize, and we kind of knew this from the beginning, that they've brought in mercenaries. It's Blackwater, it's whatever organization, whatever they're calling them, or a division of it. I like just to say Blackwater, it's much easier. That they brought in these mercenaries to keep control of the entire region, and this is what's happening right now. And Poland, Sweden, UK are proposing to send EU police to Ukraine right now. And they're saying that maybe we should be sending other law enforcement bodies in the wake of what is happening at this time. So we'll have to see if they'll bring these people and these soldiers in, which most likely they will, to keep the entire control of the people. And this is why, if we go back, this is why they haven't had the elections. This is why they wanted all the people disarmed. So you see what's happening right now. If all the people are disarmed, they bring in these mercenaries, they have complete control of the people and the country, and they can't really fight back. It makes it much easier for the government to maintain control. But again, where is the United States out there saying, well, the people have the right, the people want democracy, the people don't want to they don't want to belong to this type of government? Nowhere to be heard. Of course, they're paying them to keep control. It's actually like a dictatorship. Now, floating around right now are these satellite pictures where they're out there saying, yes, look, Russia has been building up their forces and we have satellite photos. It's almost like the same satellite photos of Iraq with weapons of mass destruction, which nobody could ever find because there weren't any. But when you really look at these and you find out where these come from, these satellite photos were taken back in August of 2013. They're not from this year. And right now, we've already had a NBC crew that went 1,200 miles up and down the border. We already had the open sky flight in there. We already had Ukraine saying that there's nothing in there. There is no troop buildups. Yes, they have battalions of troops along the border because they're in Russia. It borders Ukraine, and of course, they're going to have military assets, just like every other country has this. The United States has it. France has it. Germany. They all have it. They have troops, yes, but again, the United States central bankers are famous for trying to convince us of something that is not true. Just like they had all these photographs of these people hit by chemical weapons in Syria, but we find out it was all fake, false, and created to convince us. The same thing is happening right now. Now, the U.S., and this is intel that's coming out right now, the U.S. is urging Israel to attack Syrian forces threatening CIA-trained rebels in Golan. And the United States is pressuring Israel to attack the Syrian military in Golan Heights. Western diplomatic sources said the administration of President Barack Obama has urged Israel to stop a Syrian army advance toward U.S. trained rebels in the Golan Heights. Of course they are, because they are getting ready to strike into Syria. They want Israel to come in, take care of this, just like they flew in and they got rid of the Russian missiles at the military base in Syria. And they want them to do the same thing right now. They want them to clear the way for the strike into Syria. Now, we all understand that this major false flag event is on the horizon. I mean, there's way too much evidence to say, no, this is not going to happen. It's building every day. And right now, the FDIC is warning financial institutions of increased cyber attacks, and they want them to take precautions. So they're seeing more and more cyber attacks, and they're sending out notices saying that they're very worried that major cyber attacks will be hitting the financial institutions, and we know where all this is coming from. They are getting prepared for this false flag event, and to prepare for this, we know they've been planting certain malware, getting ready to kick off the cyber attacks with all these financial institutions. We understand NASDAQ stock market, the BAT system all have kill switches now. We've seen many glitches in the stock market and the NASDAQ, and right now the news is reporting that Iran is the world's worst cyber terrorist. In the last 12 months, Iran has emerged as a credible cyber terror threat to the U.S., targeting several U.S. government agencies. Iran is more than 5 years behind the likes of China, the U.S., and Russia in terms of its cyber capabilities, but with the right resources, that gap could quickly be bridged. And they're seeing more and more attacks from Iran. Now, this doesn't even make sense. They're in the middle of a P5+1 peace talk, but they're saying that there are bad actors and there are bad groups within Iran who pose an ever-increasing threat due to Iran's historically hostility towards U.S. business and government interests. Really? They've had sanctions for the last 30-something years. They haven't started or attacked anyone in 200 years. What have they actually done? But they're letting us know, and they're keeping the propaganda going, that Syria has been attacking. Russia now is being blamed for the Neiman Marcus and Target and other retail stores attacks. They're telling us that China has been attacking, and now Iran fits into this. They're keeping this completely up. And now they're saying there is a complete warning out there about the Heartbleed virus malware, and it's a serious internet security risk affecting millions of websites. It's a flaw in the open SSL, which is security. It's the open source encryption technology used by the vast majority of web servers. Heartbleed is said to put HTTPS e-commerce websites at risk. And this could be used for a cyber false flag to control the entire internet. The bug can give hackers access to personal data like credit cards, bank account numbers, usernames. They can siphon off money from bank accounts. And again, this is all in preparation for what is coming. Now, there was a report out there that an Al-Qaeda magazine containing a photo of people moving on a people mover train at San Francisco International Airport, along with a caption urging readers to assemble your bomb, has set off alarms at Capitol Hill. Representative Eric Swalwell told Homeland Security hearing Wednesday that he was disturbed by the English-language spring edition of the Al-Qaeda publication Inspire, which features a darkened photo of a lone young man aboard what the congressman said had been identified as a tram in San Francisco's International Airport, telling Americans and the Al-Qaeda people to start to assemble your bombs. So what do we know? We know the government has been using the propaganda to convince us that people have been coming in from Syria, because Syria is a launch pad for terrorists. They come back to the United States, they're radicalized. The FBI, the DHS have lost contact with these people. They've broken up into lone wolf groups, and they're roaming around the United States. And most of them have the training to make bombs. Lately, we've been seeing Al-Qaeda magazine telling these people to make car bombs and attack. Now we're seeing another magazine saying, start assembling your bombs. So we can see where all this is going. And plus, we have to understand that the Syrian embassies have been closed down. The Syrian government officials have been sent out of the country. We understand that CNN and the government intelligence agencies have said Syria has been hiding chemical weapons, and recently we've had a chemical weapon false flag attack in the country. So we can see what is occurring right now. We see the troop buildup in Ukraine. We see them blaming the attacks on Target and Neiman Marcus on Russia. Remember, the players are all the same. But let's not forget about North Korea. And we understand, and I said this in the beginning of the report, Janet Napolitano has told us that to expect some type of an attack that will knock out the power grid and the financial institutions. And right now, DHS came out with this new study, a long suppressed report prepared by the Department of Homeland Security for the Defense Department, concludes that North Korea could deliver on its threats to destroy the United States with a nuclear electromagnetic pulse attack, which could be exploded over the United States, which would knock out the electric power grid system. The report remains blocked from release to the American public. You're not allowed to know about this. However, a copy obtained by Peter Vincent Pry from sources within DHS finds North Korea could use its Una-3 space launch vehicle to deliver a nuclear warhead as a satellite over the South Pole to attack the U.S. from the south. Now, they are completely getting ready to do this false flag. I mean, we can see how they're going to try to do this, either with a nuclear weapon to create an EMP to knock out the electric, with a cyber attack and physical attacks on a lot of the power grid infrastructure systems. They are definitely making their plans. They understand that this war will go forward. They understand the collapse is coming. They understand the dollar reserve in the world is decreasing. Right now it went from 2000, in the year 2000, from 55% down to 33%. They expect it to go down to 20 to 25% by the end of this year. We see the yuan becoming the reserve currency. They'll probably end up backing it with gold. Russia is making their own payment system, backing their ruble by gold, and now they're making deals to bypass the dollar completely. Assad right now has been making huge amount of gains in his country, pushing the rebels out. And this is why they're bringing in more sophisticated weapons. This is why they've asked Israel to fly in and attack different parts of the region to push Syrian army back. We can see how this is all playing out. And now we have bomb makers running around the country telling everyone, get ready to make your bombs. The FDIC is out there telling everyone there are more cyber attacks and they're increasing on the financial institutions. This is continually being set up for what is coming. And Price said that if the satellite were a nuclear weapon and it exploded above the middle of the U.S., the EMP effect on the vulnerable grid system would have been nationwide. Price said that an EMP attack on the U.S. would not have to originate from North Korea, but could be a missile such as an SA-2 launched from a freighter off the U.S. East Coast or Gulf Coast. At that point, there would be no missile defense capable of halting such an event. With a missile launched from a freighter, it could be difficult to identify who is responsible for the attack, and they can just go out and say it was North Korea, Iran, Syria, Russia, China, and it would allow them to start this war. And the blame on the complete collapse of the United States would then be blamed on another country. War will start. The people in the United States would suffer because the power goes out. People are definitely not prepared. You've been seeing articles, and if you haven't seen them, it's saying that people are not prepared for this coming collapse, for the power to go out. And this is why I've been saying, if you have people in your neighborhood, make contacts, form a group. If you can't do that, then you're going to have to take matters into your own hands. You still have to do it no matter what. You should have weapons to protect your family. You should have water. You should have batteries. You should have medicine. You should have toiletries. You need all of these things, food. Make sure you have it. Yes, gold and silver for the aftermath when everything is all said and done so you can maintain your wealth and survive. But you need to make sure that you are prepared for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.